Hey, it's Sela Social Studies.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Sela Social Studies. Alright, so today we're going to be talking about the election of 1860 and its effects on the United States of America. So what happens in the election of 1860? Well, we have to lead up to the election of 1860 to figure out how the election of 1860 divides America, because a lot of people say that the result of this election in 1860 is really what drove America into the American Civil War. So prior to 1860, you have a couple of senators from Illinois who are running against each other. Who you have is the Democrat, who is Stephen Douglas. He's the guy on the right here. And you also have the new upstart Republican, Abraham Lincoln. So you have the incumbent right here, Stephen Douglas, the guy who's been senator of Illinois since 1847. And now you basically have in 1858 Lincoln now running against Douglas. And what they do is they have a set of debates. And these set of debates become very popular, and they're called the Lincoln-Douglas debates. And these debates, really the central issue over the debates is slavery. Remember what I've said in class so far since the beginning. Prior to the end of the Civil War, our country is founded on compromises, negotiations, and they're all based upon two things: representation in Congress and slavery. So in 1858, the Lincoln-Douglas debates are hot and heavy in Illinois, and they're arguing about slavery. So what happens in these Lincoln-Douglas debates? Douglas criticized Abraham Lincoln for saying that a nation could not remain a half slave and half free nation. Douglas is saying that the United States either has to be one or the other, otherwise it's going to implode upon itself. So in August of 1858, Stephen Douglas, or Senator Douglas, puts forth what we call the Freeport Doctrine. And what the Freeport Doctrine stressed is that people had the right to introduce or exclude slavery, not the government, and police forces would not enforce their decision even if decision was contradicted by the Supreme Court. And it is this Freeport Doctrine which helps Stephen Douglas win the senatorship in Illinois, but really it pushes Abraham Lincoln into becoming an important Republican Party leader and later being elected for President of the United States from the Republican Party. So we have the election of 1860. Who is going to be running against who in this election? It says right here on the slide that yes, the election of 1860 will divide the United States, and it does, very much so. So let's go over here who is running for who. This right here is the Electoral College map of the results of 1860. Northern Democrats, remember, because what you have in the South, you have Southern slave-owning Democrats. Remember when we covered the Kansas-Nebraska Act and we said the Northern Democrats split off, the Southern Democrats came down south who really supported slavery. Northern Democrats kind of break off, they kind of make a new political party or they join another political party. So we have a lot of Democrats splitting the vote. And whenever you split a vote, it dooms your election chances. So the Northern Democrats, they select Stephen Douglas from the Stephen Douglas debates, that senator from Illinois. And the Southern Democrats wind up selecting Vice President John C. Breckinridge. And the Constitutional Union Party selects John Bell from Tennessee. So when you look at this electoral map here, believe it or not, Stephen Douglas wins the state of Missouri. He doesn't even win his own state of Illinois. Abraham Lincoln is the red area here. Lincoln wins the northern states. He wins California out here, Oregon. Stephen Douglas wins Missouri. John Bell wins Tennessee, the surrounding areas here, and John Breckinridge wins the southern part of the United States. So you could see here the sectionalism and the division is strong within the United States. What can we tell about this map? And I brought this map over to this slide here too to be able to discuss it with you. The Republicans went with Lincoln, right? Lincoln wins all these northern states. They knew that they needed to have somebody who could win these states. That was very important. So he wins the presidency, and that really angers the Southerners. Why does it anger the Southerners? Listen to this fact here. Lincoln had won this election without getting one vote from the South. As a matter of fact, Lincoln had not even campaigned. He did not go to the South to try to get votes. He wasn't even on the ballot in many southern states. He wasn't even a choice for a lot of these states in the South. So 0 votes from the South. He wins the election with the Electoral College from the North. Southerners believed that Lincoln would go ahead and end slavery, even though during the Lincoln-Douglas debates and during his campaigning for president, Lincoln never said that he would fully abolish slavery. Lincoln stated that he would stop the spread of slavery to the West. He believed that if you had slavery, you could keep the institution of slavery, just not to spread it. Lincoln's first priority was to preserve the Union. He did not want the South to break apart from the North as he feared what would happen. So again, we'll cover this because this is important. Lincoln said that he would not abolish slavery where it existed, which meant all these southern states who didn't even give Lincoln a chance, they did not listen to him or heed his warning. He said they had slaves, they can keep them. They just didn't want it to spread west. Now, what's the issue with that? Again, representation in Congress. If you can spread west and have more slave states, then you can have more representation in Congress. So the dispute over slavery and the election of 1860 led the southern states to what we call secede from the Union, or leave the Union. People in the South believed that their economy and their way of life would be destroyed if Abraham Lincoln was president. You would see people and they would have straw dummies representing Abraham Lincoln out in the field, and they would hang him and they would burn him and they would beat him. This is the hatred that the South felt for Abraham Lincoln. They believed that their economy and way of life would be destroyed. Now, there's an issue there, because this chapter I'm discussing, I give you about 5 or 6 different what we call causes, quote-unquote causes, of the Civil War. But what is really every one of these causes based upon? Their economy based upon slavery. Way of life based upon slavery. Dred Scott, slavery. Compromise of 1850, slavery. Uncle Tom's Cabin, slavery. So all these are the basis of slavery. And even when the South Carolina legislature meets in Charleston and sign the withdrawal papers from the Union in December of 1860, they mention slavery in there well over 10, 11, 12 times. They mention the difference between slave states and free states. So the legislature meets in Charleston, South Carolina, and they say, hey, listen, we believe that we could exit the Union because we voluntarily entered the Union. It would be like a book club. If I were able to enter the book club voluntarily, I should be able to leave the book club voluntarily. So that's why they signed these articles of secession. And after South Carolina, in 1860, you wind up having Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, all seceding from the Union. And what they do is they create what we call the Confederate States of America. And these Confederate States of America, they choose Jefferson Davis of Mississippi to be the president of the Confederate States of America. So right now, in 1860, 1861, 62, during the time of the Civil War, the United States unofficially has 2 presidents, Abraham Lincoln of the Union, Jefferson Davis of the Confederacy. Now, Lincoln was inaugurated on March 4th, 1861, and during this time, you have a senator who really tries this last-ditch effort to stop the Civil War from happening. Senator John Crittenden proposed a series of constitutional amendments hoping to appease the South by federally protecting slavery. Why does he want to do this so bad? Well, Crittenden had two sons, and one of his sons wound up being a general of the Confederacy, and one of his sons happened to be a general of the Union Army. So he's sitting here saying, oh my gosh, I have two sons that because of slavery could possibly die in this war. So what Crittenden proposes is he says, hey, let's take that 3630 line, shove it all the way out to the Pacific Ocean. Lincoln was against it. There was no compromise about this extension of slavery, and it's rejected in Congress. So poor Senator Crittenden had his sons fighting against each other in this war. Lincoln opposed the idea that Southern states could just leave the Union because they were unhappy with the government's position on slavery. Lincoln, seeing this happen, announced in his inaugural address that he would keep all government property like forts and armories in the seceding states, which means like the Battle of Fort Sumter, the first battle of the Civil War, that was a federal fort. He said he's not going to let it go, and that's why that's where the battles begin. That's where the Civil War begins. Abraham Lincoln really hoped that these southern states would return to the Union without a war. However, because of all of the scenarios that we went through, all of our causes of the Civil War, and now the Civil War is set for the United States of America between 1861 and 1865.